After all these years, Shock Theater remained Channel 39's most popular piece of locally produced programming. Thus, he was not overly worried when he was summoned to the station manager's office at the end of the final host segment for Motel Hell. His only concern at that point was the time factor. Getting from his set to Greg McCready's office would take several minutes. Then, of course, he'd need several more minutes to get back to the set after the meeting concluded. Without even factoring in the length of the meeting, he'd be cutting it close to get back in time to do the intro segment for Videodrome. His initial impulse was to decline the invitation. No meeting with the station manager could possibly be short enough to allow for a timely return to set. "Perhaps Mr. McCready has forgotten," he told the young intern, who'd been sent to fetch him. "Today is Halloween, and I'm in the midst of hosting an all-day horror marathon, just as I have every year for decades. I'm not sure how an event of this magnitude could possibly slip his mind. But it must be so, because otherwise he would surely know I will not have an opportunity to visit his office until after the marathon is over. Explain this to Mr. McCready and pass along my apologies." The gangly intern was thin to the point of looking starved. His protruding Adam's apple was among the most prominent Goldman had ever seen. There was something almost grotesque about it. It was especially noticeable when the young man was nervous. Like now. "I just can't do that, Mr. Goldman. Mr. McCready told me not to take no for an answer." The intern's face was red, and he was speaking in a higher register than usual, a reedy tone that grated on Goldman's ears. "He knows the marathon is still going, and he said to tell you it doesn't matter. Attendance is mandatory, not optional. His words, not mine. Obviously. I'm sorry, Mr. Goldman, but you really need to go." Goldman frowned. "Jesus. What's so all-fired important that he has to see me right now?" The intern shrugged. "I don't know, Mr. Goldman. He wouldn't say. I'm sorry." About 8 minutes later, he was standing outside the closed door to McCready's office. He was still more irritated than concerned, but by then a tiny dollop of worry had entered his mind. There had been little room in his head today for anything other than the marathon, always the most important day of the year for a show. But between segments, he'd heard a bit about the strange wave of violence taking place throughout Littleburg. According to his crew, reports of violent acts were continuing to come in with no indication yet of the strange outbreak beginning to ebb. He didn't believe Channel 39 would cut the marathon short to go to breaking news coverage of the developing story, but something like that could explain why he'd been ordered to McCready's office. He knocked on the door and opened it when he heard the manager say, "Come in." The office was small and unassuming, the opposite of what an outsider might expect for the boss of a television station. It looked more like the office of a junior accountant at a small firm, with the inexpensive second-rate furnishings and the piles of haphazardly stacked paperwork on McCready's desk. An executive at a station in an even moderately larger market would definitely have a more impressive desk than the embarrassing office supply store reject McCready sat behind. Channel 39, however, wasn't even really a small market station. Littleburg was more of a micro-market. Its operating budget was a reflection of this reality. Nobody was getting rich at Channel 39. Not even the man behind revered local institution, Count Gravemore. McCready rose from his seat behind the desk, and the two men shook hands, with the manager then gesturing for Goldman to sit in the chair opposite the desk. Goldman did so, as McCready sat down again. Goldman frowned as he glanced to his right. 3 people he recognized were crowded into the little couch against the side wall there. One was a middle-aged man named Hal Meyer. Hal was Channel 39's programming director. At the opposite end of the couch was Jerry Russell, a studio technician. Seated between these men was the channel's evening news anchor, Joyce Mitchell. Other than Goldman himself, the bottle-blonde stunner was the closest thing the station had to a star. All 3 had rubber masks clutched tightly in their laps. Goldman looked at McCready. "What's going on here?" Another rubber mask was face down on the station manager's desk, with only its white interior visible. "Did you call me in here to tell me you're all going to a Halloween party and are leaving me in charge? Because I'm afraid I'm not up to the task. Not with the marathon still going on." McCready chuckled. "That's not why I called you in here, Maury." He rearranged his features in a way meant to convey a shift to a more somber demeanor, but he didn't quite succeed.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.